the Xyrathian survey ship drifted through the empty void, its sensors sweeping across the cold space around the dead star. The crew expected to find nothing more than dust and fragments of old asteroids, but then a strange metallic echo appeared on their scanners. At first it seemed like a glitch, a harmless blip that sometimes happened in the interference near collapsed stars. But the signal repeated, steady and clear, and the ship slowed as the crew leaned forward in surprise. Whatever they were detecting was large. Very large. As they approached, the shape of the object slowly emerged from the darkness, lit only by faint reflections of distant starlight. The structure was enormous, stretching far beyond the size of any known vessel in the Xyrathian records. The metal looked old, almost fossilized, yet the design was sharp and intentional. The ship had clear lines, plated armor, and what looked like massive weapon mounts along its sides. The crew felt a quiet chill spread across the bridge. This was no drifting scrap. This was a warship. The closer they came, the more unsettling the discovery became. Their scanners estimated the object was at least 3 kilometers long, but its mass was surprisingly high, as if built from a material far denser than anything the Xyrathians used. Even more confusing, the preliminary dating scans indicated that the ship was ancient. Not centuries old. Not thousands. The readings suggested it had been here for nearly 100,000 years. That should have been impossible. No known species in the galaxy had existed that long, and certainly none capable of building something like this. The Xyrathians exchanged uneasy glances. They prided themselves on their knowledge of galactic history, but this ship did not fit anywhere. It was too advanced to be primitive relic technology, yet far too old to be connected to any modern civilization. The crew felt as though they were staring at a ghost from a forgotten age. Their ship circled the structure slowly, examining every scorched panel, every darkened corridor window, every silent weapon port. There were long scars across its hull, melted sections where energy blasts had eaten through armor, deep gouges left by impacts from weapons unknown. This ship had fought a war. A terrible one. The level of damage suggested battles so intense that only the strongest materials could survive them. Yet despite the wounds, the ship remained intact, as though it had refused to die even after the last of its crew had fallen. One of the scientists whispered that the design felt aggressive. Not evil, but built with the purpose of protecting or destroying on a scale the Xyrathians had never seen. The hull architecture was different from their own smooth, curved style. It had sharp angles and reinforced structures, almost like the builders expected their enemies to hit with unimaginable force. The markings along the plating were unlike any language in the galactic archives. They looked almost human, though the crew did not recognize the symbols yet. As they drifted alongside a massive viewing panel, they saw the interior through cracks in the ship's broken windows. The inside was just as strange as the exterior. The corridors were wide, built for tall beings with heavy armor or equipment. The control stations were positioned in a way that suggested confident, forward-facing warriors. Even the lighting fixtures, long dead, were placed with purpose. Everything about the ship told a story of a civilization that valued strength, discipline, and readiness. The captain finally gave the order to prepare a boarding team. Curiosity beat fear, though fear still gripped their hearts. They had to know who built the ship, why it was here, and what the strange readings meant. The ship might contain forgotten technology, historical knowledge, or clues about a species wiped from time. But it might also hold dangers they were not equipped to face. Before boarding, they performed one final scan to ensure there were no active life signs or harmful energy sources. The scan returned silent. No movement, no heartbeat, no heat. The warship was truly dead, a drifting monument to a civilization erased from memory. And yet something about it felt alive, as if the ship itself was waiting for someone to open its doors again. The boarding crew stood ready, their suits sealed, their tools glowing softly as they prepared to step into the unknown. As the airlock extended and connected with the ancient hull, a deep vibration hummed through the Xyrathian ship, almost like the relic was stirring at their arrival. The crew stiffened, unsure whether the vibration was real or imagined, but none of them turned back. They were about to take the first steps into a story buried for 100,000 years, and none of them realized how much the galaxy was about to change because of it. The boarding team stepped carefully onto the metal surface of the ancient warship, their boots making soft echoes in the silent, frozen corridors. The first thing they noticed was the stillness. It was a silence so complete that it felt heavy, as if a whole world had been trapped here without a single breath of life for thousands of centuries. Dust floated in the beam of their helmet lights, untouched for longer than any civilization had existed. Every step they took felt like they were disturbing something sacred, something that had been waiting in the dark far too long. They walked deeper inside, and the corridor widened so much that even their largest transport machines could have moved through it with ease. The walls were thick, built with layers of unknown metal, some melted or cracked as if they had been struck by powerful energy blasts. The melted places looked like frozen waterfalls, metal turned liquid and hardened again during battle. The team stopped often, staring in awe and confusion, trying to imagine what kind of weapon could burn through such strong material. Their own ships used advanced alloys, but nothing like this. Nothing they knew could even scratch these walls under normal conditions. Strange symbols were carved or printed along the corridor walls. The writing looked sharp, bold, and filled with purpose. The scientists scanned it, but their translators failed to recognize even a single character. It was unlike any language in the galactic database. Still, the shapes had intention, like warnings, directions, or maybe battle commands. The crew felt chills as they moved forward, wondering what kind of beings had once walked these halls. The deeper they went, the more they noticed the ship's design choices. Everything was built for beings taller and stronger than Zyrathians. The door frames were high enough to fit someone nearly twice their height. The steps were broad. The handrails were thick, shaped for large armored hands. It felt as if the ship expected heavy soldiers to run through these corridors during war, their boots pounding against the floor, shouting orders, preparing for battle after battle. The thought made the aliens nervous. Whoever built this ship was powerful, confident, and ready for war on a scale they could not imagine. They entered a large chamber that looked like a command post. Broken screens hung from tilted metal arms, wires spilled out like mechanical vines, and long tables were scattered across the room. Some screens still had faint markings burned into them from long-ago power surges. One scientist touched the surface gently, and the dust fell away to reveal the imprint of a hand much larger than theirs. For a moment, no one spoke. They imagined the person who had left it, standing there, perhaps giving orders during the last moments of a great battle. As they moved on, they found evidence of chaos. Some doors were ripped open from the inside, as if someone or something had forced its way out. Others were sealed shut with emergency locks and heavy plating. Burn marks and scratches marked almost every surface. They found what looked like the remains of defensive systems, turret mounts, shattered armor plating, and small drone bases long dead. Whatever battle had taken place here must have been desperate. The aliens felt a growing fear as they followed the signs of destruction, silently hoping nothing dangerous remained active. In one corridor, the walls were curved inward, crushed by massive force. The scientists scanning the damage whispered that the pressure came from outside the ship, not inside. Something powerful had tried to break its way into the warship. Something so strong that even this ancient metal had bent under the impact. The thought made everyone uneasy. What kind of enemy could threaten a ship this strong? And if such enemies existed, where were they now? The boarding team reached a central passageway that led to a heavy, sealed bulkhead. The door was enormous, thick enough to survive the explosion of a star. It was covered in more of the strange symbols, larger this time, almost like a warning carved into the heart of the ship. The crew debated whether they should open it. Their fear told them to leave it alone. But their curiosity, and the chance to understand the greatest discovery in galactic history, pushed them forward. When they activated their cutting equipment, the entire ship made a low, deep sound, almost like a distant heartbeat waking up. The lights flickered faintly overhead, then went dark again. The crew froze in shock. They looked at each other, unsure if they had imagined it. But no one stepped back. They had already come too far. They were the first living beings to set foot on this ship in 100,000 years. And none of them knew that opening that door would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The moment the boarding crew forced open the sealed bulkhead, a faint ripple of energy passed through the entire ship, almost like a sleeping giant taking its first weak breath. A soft vibration spread along the floor beneath their boots. Dust drifted from the ceiling in tiny waves, and the temperature began to rise by a few degrees, so slowly that the crew barely noticed at first. But then a dim light flickered somewhere deep within the corridors behind them, a pulse of life in a place that had been dead for 100,000 years. The aliens stopped moving, their hearts pounding, unsure if they had awakened something dangerous or simply triggered an old machine. Inside the newly opened chamber, glowing strands of damaged wiring hung like roots from the ceiling. The room was filled with dark consoles, huge screens shattered by long-ago impacts, and a central pillar that looked like a power spine. The moment the door had opened, the pillar had begun to hum softly. Its dusty metal panels vibrated as ancient circuits within tried to reactivate. One of the scientists stepped closer, holding up a scanner. The readings were chaotic. The power core was damaged, barely functional, but desperately pulling energy from whatever backup systems still had a spark of life. A sudden spark of blue light jumped across the room, connecting two broken wires. Panels along the walls flickered with faded symbols. The aliens stared, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The ship was not powered by any fuel they recognized. It seemed to draw energy from a folded pocket dimension, a technology far beyond their understanding. Even damaged, it still obeyed its ancient programming. Something inside had sensed that the ship had been accessed, and now it was waking up. A loud metallic crack echoed through the chamber as one of the consoles suddenly forced itself upright, shifting into position like a creature stretching stiff limbs after centuries of stillness. Dust poured off its surface as holographic projectors flickered with life for the first time in ages. The crew backed away quickly. Their instincts screamed danger, but their curiosity kept them rooted in place. They needed to see what would happen next. A deep synthetic voice, distorted and fragmented by time, filled the air. The language was unknown, harsh yet rhythmic. The sound made the lights shiver in response. The ship's AI was trying to speak. It repeated the message several times, each attempt more stable than the last. The translator implants in the crew's helmets worked desperately, stitching patterns together, reorganizing sounds, identifying structure. Slowly, painfully, the system began forming the first rough translation. The AI identified itself as the caretaker unit of the warship. Its original voice had probably been clear and strong, but now it was a broken whisper trapped between static and corrupted memory fragments. The crew stood frozen, realizing this intelligence had been alone for longer than their entire species had existed. Its mind must have decayed, but some core part of it still functioned, still guarded the ship, still followed the ancient orders given to it by a long-gone human commander. Without warning, lights throughout the chamber flickered on fully, bathing everything in a cold, white glow. The power surge raced through the walls, along the floors, up the passageways the aliens had walked earlier. Far behind them, doors they had passed through hissed shut automatically. Emergency lights switched to standby mode. The ship was no longer waiting. The ship was alive. Holograms burst into view around the central pillar. Broken images of armored figures flashed like ghosts. Some showed humans running through the corridors, shouting commands, firing weapons. Others displayed star maps filled with red battle markers. There were cries, explosions, and flashes of war too fast for the crew to understand. The boarding team stood in complete silence as the AI struggled to rebuild its memories, replaying fragments of its final moments before the ship had fallen dark. The room shook as the main energy core reconnected with the ship's auxiliary systems. Somewhere deep inside the vessel, giant machinery groaned to life. Fans that had been silent for millennia began to spin slowly. Security systems attempted to restart, sending error warnings across the consoles. One turret mount in a distant corridor twitched as though trying to wake. The ship was testing its capabilities, searching for life signatures, checking for threats. Suddenly, the entire chamber flashed red. A piercing alarm filled the air. The AI had detected unauthorized beings on board. The aliens panicked. They shouted warnings to each other, scrambling toward the door they had entered. But the door slammed shut with a heavy metallic thud, locking them inside. The holograms shifted rapidly, showing symbols the translator barely managed to interpret. The message repeated in a chilling tone. Unknown entities detected on board. Initiating defense protocol. The crew's hearts raced. They had awakened something ancient, powerful, and still bound to its duty. And now the ship believed they were a threat. The alarm continued to echo through the ancient warship, but instead of attacking the aliens immediately, the AI suddenly paused, its systems hesitating as if trying to remember something lost in time. The red lights dimmed slightly, flickering between danger mode and something else entirely. The crew exchanged confused glances. They were trapped, but the ship didn't strike. It felt like the AI was struggling, pulling fragments of its old identity from a damaged memory bank. Then, without warning, the holograms in the room shifted. The images that had been chaotic and broken began to stabilize, becoming clearer and brighter, as if the machine had finally connected to a deeper archive. The first human figure appeared slowly, like a ghost forming from mist. Tall, armored, and commanding. The aliens stared in shock. The figure wasn't a monster or some unknown creature. It looked humanoid. More than that, it looked almost like them, just bigger, stronger, and wrapped in heavy battle armor made from materials that reflected the harsh lights like polished stone. The hologram showed the humans standing proudly on a battlefield, giving orders to others who looked similar. The room grew quiet as the scenes unfolded, revealing memories sealed for 100,000 years. Another hologram flashed to life, this time showing the inside of the ship during its prime. Humans were running through the corridors, their movements fast and disciplined. Their armor clicked against the metal floors as they prepared for something large and terrifying. One human touched a console, shouting commands the aliens couldn't understand. The AI translated bits and pieces automatically. Words like shields, impact, breach, and hold the line echoed faintly through the chamber. The Zyrathian crew felt hairs rise on their necks. They were watching history come alive. The holograms changed again, revealing an enormous star map. Entire galaxies were highlighted. Massive red symbols marked territories. Green and blue areas showed human expansion. But then the red symbols began to spread like a disease, consuming entire star clusters. The aliens leaned closer. They had never seen these regions occupied by any known species. They had always believed they were empty space. But the hologram told a different story. A story erased by time. The AI translated the map labels slowly as corrupted data rebuilt itself piece by piece. The enemy that attacked humanity was marked as extragalactic invaders. The symbols shifted into swirling shapes that moved unnaturally across the star map. These enemies came from beyond the galaxy, a place no living species had ever explored. They moved through the stars like shadows, consuming everything in their path. The aliens felt a deep fear. If these creatures had existed once, were they truly gone? More holograms appeared. Humans in advanced ships fought impossible battles, firing weapons powerful enough to turn moons into dust. Explosions lit up entire systems. Ships collided in fiery arcs. It was war unlike anything the aliens had ever imagined. The humans fought bravely, but the enemy's numbers were endless. One recording showed the commander of the Astra Remnant speaking. His voice was calm but tired, filled with pain and determination. The translator slowly revealed his message. He said they were evacuating survivors, retreating to the far edge of the galaxy. The ship's mission had changed. Its purpose was no longer victory, but protection of the last hope of humanity. The aliens felt their breath catch. Humanity had been real. They were not myths or stories told by explorers. They had been a powerful, widespread civilization. And this ship, the one these aliens had stumbled upon, had been one of the last lights of that lost empire. The AI replayed moments of the humans' final stand. The crew saw soldiers fighting enemies that looked like dark shapes with glowing eyes. They saw the ship being hit by blasts powerful enough to crack planets. They saw the humans' courage as they tried to buy time for their people to escape and survive somewhere far away. One hologram showed the ship's archive chamber, perfectly preserved in the recording. The commander placed a hand on the central console, giving the AI strict orders. Protect the ship. Protect the data. Activate only if someone tried to access the archives. And most importantly, never allow the enemy, or anyone unknown, to take control of the weapon hidden deep within the ship. When this recording ended, the hologram remained still for a moment before dissolving back into fragments. The aliens stood frozen, overwhelmed. They had expected to explore a dead relic. They had not expected to uncover an entire forgotten chapter of galactic history. The AI's light softened. The danger alarms faded. Instead of viewing them as threats, the ship now recognized that these beings had awakened it unintentionally. They were not enemies. They were witnesses. But even as the AI calmed, the crew sensed something else awakening deeper in the ship, something the humans had sealed away long ago. And now, the past was rising again, carrying with it the echoes of an ancient war. The room slowly returned to silence as the holograms faded, but the aliens stood frozen, trying to understand the weight of everything they had just seen. Their minds raced. It was hard to believe that a species so powerful, so advanced, and so widespread across the galaxy had simply disappeared from all records. The Xyrathians had always thought themselves to be one of the earliest intelligent races. Yet now, standing inside this ancient warship, they realized how young and small they truly were in the grand history of the universe. One of the scientists stepped toward a console still glowing faintly. The AI responded by projecting another series of images, this time slower, calmer, almost like a documentary from the past. These scenes were not about war. They were about humanity's rise. The aliens watched a new story unfold, one the galaxy had forgotten entirely. They saw the early human explorers traveling from world to world, building colonies, discovering new star routes, and forming peaceful alliances. Humans were curious, bold, and determined. They didn't fear danger. They embraced it. They pushed into territories filled with storms, black holes, and unstable space just to see what lay beyond. Their technology grew at a speed no species had matched since. They developed ships capable of near-instant travel between distant stars. They built floating cities above gas giants, underwater settlements beneath icy oceans, and entire civilizations inside hollowed asteroid belts. Every scene showed humans carving their path through the galaxy with courage and hope. They weren't conquerors, they were explorers. But their peaceful age did not last forever. The holograms shifted as the timeline progressed. Human star maps grew too large. Their borders stretched too far. They encountered threats, solved disputes, handled rebellions, and faced dangers no species had encountered before. Yet through it all, humanity adapted, learning faster than any race the Xyrathians knew. More images appeared: scientists, soldiers, engineers, children playing under artificial suns, families traveling between planets as easily as stepping onto a train. It was clear that humanity had once been everywhere. Every corner of the galaxy had carried traces of them. The idea shocked the Xyrathians. If humanity was this widespread, how had their entire existence vanished? The hologram answered without words. The peaceful scenes dissolved into chaos once more. The extragalactic invaders returned in the recordings, this time shown in frightening detail. They were monstrous shapes, shifting like shadows, forming jagged silhouettes that hurt the eyes. Their weapons tore apart planets. Their fleets stretched across galaxies like dark storms. Humanity fought bravely, but even their might couldn't stop the endless wave of destruction. The AI showed humans building massive defensive lines across multiple star systems. It showed desperate battles where entire constellations were turned into firestorms. It showed heroic last stands, evacuation fleets, and scientists working day and night to create weapons capable of stopping an enemy that felt more like a nightmare than a physical species. The aliens watched humanity's fall in silence. The recordings showed the destruction of entire human megacities, the evacuation of the last colonies, and the evacuation order that sent the Astra remnant out into dark space. The warship's mission became clear: protect history, hide dangerous technology, and survive long enough for someone in the future to know the truth. As the recording ended, The AI projected one last image, a symbol of humanity. Proud, strong, carved into ancient metal. Beneath it were words translated slowly by the system. We lived. We fought. We endured. Our story will not be forgotten. The aliens felt a heaviness in their hearts. They understood now that humanity had not simply vanished. They had been erased by a war no one recorded, a war too ancient for any surviving species to remember. The galaxy had healed and regrown, but at a terrible cost. The memory of its greatest defenders had been lost. The Xyrathians realized something else too. This warship was not just a relic. It was a warning, a reminder of an enemy that had once tried to wipe out an entire galaxy. An enemy that could return. The AI's lights dimmed, almost as if it mourned the memories it had shown. But the ship itself seemed to breathe with new life, as if relieved that someone finally understood at least a small part of what had happened. The aliens looked at each other with fear and wonder. They hadn't just discovered a ship. They had uncovered an entire lost era of the galaxy's history. And the more they learned, the more they felt the weight of responsibility settle onto their shoulders. The truth was awake now. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The deeper the aliens explored the ancient warship, the more uneasy they became. Every step into the lower decks felt heavier, as if the air itself was warning them to turn back. The lights flickered weakly in long corridors that stretched into darkness, and the metal walls carried strange marks, symbols scratched in by human hands during the final days. Some looked like numbers, others like messages, but all were filled with desperation. The Xyrathian crew wondered what last battles had taken place here and what the humans had tried to protect. They finally reached a large sealed chamber, far bigger than any they had entered before. The door was made of impossibly thick metal, layered with glowing lines that pulsed with old power. Even after 100,000 years, the energy inside the door was alive. The team scanned it and quickly realized that this was no ordinary room. The readings were unstable and strange, filled with dimensional distortions. The scientist leading the scan whispered that whatever was behind this door was dangerous on a level none of them had ever encountered. The AI's voice suddenly echoed around them, distorted and cracked. It repeated a warning in a broken language, which the translator struggled to decode, but a few words came through clearly: forbidden, sealed, do not activate. Instead of scaring them away, the warnings made the crew even more curious. They believed the humans had hidden powerful technology inside this chamber, something that could change the future of the galaxy. Something valuable. Ignoring the warnings, the team used their tools to break the seal. The moment their saws touched the outer layer, the entire ship trembled. Lights across the walls brightened, then dimmed. A deep vibration ran through the floor like a giant heartbeat. Some of the aliens stepped back in fear, but the scientists urged them forward. They wanted to see what the humans had left behind. After a long effort, the door finally slid open with a loud metallic groan. A cold wind rushed out, like air escaping from another world. Inside the chamber, the room was lined with strange machines grown into the floor like roots of an ancient tree. In the center was a massive device shaped like a spiraling core, floating above the ground. It was surrounded by protective energy rings that flickered weakly. The machine looked asleep, but not dead. The aliens stared in silence, feeling a mixture of awe and dread. Their scanners immediately went wild. The machine's readings were not from normal space. It seemed to pull energy from different dimensions and timelines, folding them together in a way that no known species could replicate. The scientist began to speak excitedly, explaining that this device was capable of bending time itself. If activated fully, it could erase entire star systems or even collapse parts of the universe into nothingness. It was the last superweapon of the human empire, a temporal dimensional implosion device. The AI appeared in the chamber as a hologram, its form crackling and breaking. It tried to stop them, raising its voice, repeating words of danger and destruction. But the aliens ignored the message again. Their curiosity outweighed their fear. They stepped closer to the weapon, touching the control panels, trying to understand how it worked. The moment their hands brushed the controls, alarms erupted throughout the ship. Red lights flashed violently, sirens screamed, and the gravity in the chamber flickered. The floating weapon pulsed once, releasing a shockwave that shook the entire deck. Sparks flew from the walls. Sections of the ship that had been silent for ages suddenly came online, one after another. The AI screamed warnings, begging the intruders to step away. But it was too late. By touching the device, the aliens had accidentally activated dormant systems. The weapon began to search for its last command. The AI tried to override it, but its corrupted memory slowed it down. Meanwhile, the ship began transmitting a signal, a distress beacon that hadn't been used in 100,000 years. It traveled through space faster than light, using human quantum channels unknown to modern species. The aliens panicked. They tried to shut down the device, but every button, every switch, every command only made the weapon pull stronger. The energy rings glowed brighter, casting long shadows across the chamber. Strange whispers filled the air, as if the weapon itself had a consciousness, remembering the war it had once been built for. Outside the ship, the beacon flashed again and again, calling into the dark reaches of space. The Zyrathians didn't know it, but humans had created these channels for a reason. They were not just for communication, they were for summoning help or warning survivors, or signaling hidden fleets waiting in exile. As the beacon fired its final pulse, the warship seemed to sigh, as if awakening fully at last. The aliens stood in shock, staring at the glowing superweapon, realizing they had triggered something far larger than themselves. Something ancient. Something powerful. Something that humans had sworn to keep sealed forever. And now, somewhere across the galaxy, something had heard the call. The distress beacon from the ancient warship shot across the galaxy like a silent scream, traveling through forgotten human quantum channels that no modern species even knew existed. The aliens inside the ship had no idea what they had awakened. They only knew that the lights were flickering, the AI was panicking, and the weapon chamber felt alive with unstable power. The whole ship vibrated, almost as if it were preparing for something or someone. The Zyrathians huddled together, their hearts pounding. All they could do was wait and hope the weapon didn't explode. Far beyond their reach, past the mapped star systems and the peaceful regions of space, in a desolate dark zone where no species had dared to explore, something stirred. At first, there was silence. Then faint energy ripples began to move like ocean waves. A massive shadow shifted in the darkness, almost blending with the void itself. Hidden deep inside this uncharted region was a fleet, silent, invisible, and long forgotten by the galaxy. These ships had been asleep for thousands of centuries, waiting for a signal only humans could send. When the distress beacon reached them, their systems responded instantly. Lights flickered on, engines hummed, and old but powerful weapons came online. The ships awakened one by one, like ancient guardians rising from their graves. Their designs were sleek, dark, and extremely advanced, far superior to anything the galaxy currently knew. They were built by humanity's last survivors, a remnant force that had fled into dark space to rebuild, to heal, and to wait for the right moment. Inside one of the large command ships, a human commander opened his eyes as the cryostasis chamber released him. His breath formed a cloud of frost as he stepped out, his joints stiff but his mind sharp. Other humans around him stepped out of their chambers as well, stretching and adjusting their armor. They were not like the humans seen in old holograms. These humans were taller, stronger, and genetically enhanced. Their armor was darker, smoother, and covered in symbols of their long-lost empire. They had been living in the shadows of the galaxy, training for the day the past returned. The commander approached a glowing console displaying the beacon's origin. It showed the exact coordinates of the ancient warship, the Astra Remnant. A cold seriousness filled his eyes. That ship was one of humanity's last memory vaults, a sacred relic. If someone had activated it, something terrible, or very important, had happened. Without wasting time, he gave the order to move. The fleet began to shift through dark space, using advanced engines that folded dimensions around them. To outside observers, they would simply appear out of nowhere. The fleet traveled at impossible speed, crossing what would have taken others months in just minutes. As they approached the region where the Zyrathians were exploring, sensors detected unfamiliar vessels near the warship. The human commanders studied the readings carefully. They were not enemies from the old war. They were a young species, curious and unaware of what they had touched. In the ancient warship, the aliens felt the floor vibrate more intensely. The AI's lights brightened with sudden clarity, almost relieved, as if it recognized something approaching. The sirens abruptly stopped. The ship went quiet. Too quiet. Before the aliens could understand what was happening, the hull's outer sensors activated, showing blurry shapes appearing right outside. Then the darkness around the warship bent, twisted, and split open like a hole in space. A massive human ship emerged, black and shining with energy. It was much smaller than the Astra remnant but far more advanced. Its surface reflected no light, absorbing everything like a living shadow. Several smaller escort ships appeared beside it, forming a silent formation around the ancient warship. The Zyrathians stared at the display screens in disbelief. They had never seen ships like these before. They were elegant yet terrifying, silent yet powerful. Before they could react, a beam of soft white light scanned the warship, analyzing every corner. The AI spoke again, this time with a steady voice. Human signature detected. Authorization accepted. The ancient warship unlocked all remaining systems automatically. Moments later, a boarding ramp extended from the sleek human ship, connecting to the warship's side. Heavy footsteps echoed as the humans walked through the corridors with confidence. Their silhouettes were tall, armored, and unmistakably human. When the Zyrathians finally saw them face to face, they felt a strange mix of fear and awe. These were not creatures of myth. They were real, alive, and stronger than anything the aliens had expected. The human commander stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. He didn't raise a weapon. He simply observed the frightened aliens with calm, unreadable eyes. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "You activated a beacon that was never meant for your species," he said in a deep, steady voice. "But we are here now." The Zyrathians didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Humanity had returned, and their arrival meant that the galaxy's quiet age was about to end forever. The human commander stood silently for a moment, studying the terrified Zyrathian crew. His expression was calm, but there was a weight behind his eyes, a silent history that the aliens could feel even without words. The ancient warship hummed softly around them, reacting to the presence of real humans for the first time in 100,000 years. The AI stabilized, its lights shifting from warning red to a calm blue glow. The ship had recognized its rightful masters. The humans walked through the corridors with confidence, their boots clicking on the metal floor, echoing like memories returning home. Every panel they passed lit up automatically, every sealed door opened without resistance. It was as if the warship itself was awakening fully, welcoming its long-lost guardians. The aliens followed nervously, unsure whether they were prisoners or witnesses. They didn't dare run. They didn't dare speak. They simply watched. The commander approached the central archive chamber where the Zyrathians had triggered the awakening. He placed a hand on the main console. The ship responded instantly, projecting clear, stable holograms of the past. Not fragmented. Not broken. Perfect. The final moments of the human empire appeared in front of them, sharper and clearer than before. The AI, now fully awake, replayed everything for its commander. The battles. The sacrifices. The mission. The sealed superweapon. The warnings. The commander's jaw tightened as he watched. Even after thousands of centuries, the pain of humanity's fall still lived in these recordings. When the holograms faded, he looked at the aliens. His voice was neither angry nor soft. It carried authority, the kind that came from a species shaped by extinction. "You have opened something you do not understand," he said slowly, "and something you should never have touched." The Zyrathians lowered their heads in fear. One of them tried to speak, apologizing in a trembling voice, saying they never meant harm, that they only sought knowledge. The commander listened, but his expression did not change. He walked toward the weapon chamber, and the others followed. When they entered the chamber, the superweapon still glowed faintly, its rings spinning slowly as if caught between waking and sleeping. The humans looked at it with deep familiarity, but also with sorrow. This weapon was humanity's last desperate creation, meant to stop a nightmare enemy at the cost of everything else. The commander touched the control panel, and instantly the dangerous energy calmed. The weapon obeyed him. It accepted his authority. Only a true human could shut it down safely. The chamber dimmed, returning to a peaceful quiet. The Xyrathians sighed with relief, but their relief did not last long. The commander turned to them and said, "Your actions have consequences." The beacon you triggered was a military signal. It was designed to awaken surviving human forces and warn them that the enemy might have returned. The aliens' eyes widened. They asked if the invaders were coming back. The commander shook his head slowly. "We do not know," he said, "but we cannot ignore the possibility." He explained that humanity had hidden themselves in dark space to rebuild, recover, and watch. They had stayed in the shadows because they feared drawing the enemy's attention again. But now, with the beacon active, every human fleet would be alerted. They would prepare. They would investigate. They would rise again to protect the galaxy, whether the galaxy was ready or not. The Xyrathians asked what would happen to them. The commander studied them for a long moment, then finally answered. "You are not our enemies," he said. "You awakened our vessel, but you also preserved it by being careful. If you meant harm, we would know." The aliens felt a wave of relief, but the commander continued. "However, you cannot leave with everything you have seen. Some knowledge is too dangerous for young species." He ordered his soldiers to retrieve the Xyrathian scans, recordings, and data logs. The aliens surrendered everything without argument. The humans were not cruel. They did not hurt them. They simply acted with the responsibility of a civilization that had once carried the fate of the galaxy on their shoulders. When the data was secured, the commander signaled his fleet. The sleek black ships outside powered up, shifting the dark space around them. The humans prepared to reclaim the Astra remnant. The warships slowly activated thrusters that had not fired in thousands of centuries. The sound was like thunder awakening. Before leaving, the commander looked at the Xyrathians one last time. "You have seen the past," he said, "and now you know the truth. Humanity did not vanish. We waited, and we are returning." The aliens watched in awe as the human fleet surrounded the ancient warship. The ships vanished into folded space, leaving behind only silence and a trembling feeling in the hearts of the Xyrathians. The galaxy had been calm for countless years, but that calm was ending. Humanity was back. And the universe would never be the same again.